My mother's voice always carried a certain kind of calm. The calm people use right before they do something cruel and pretend it's for your own good. So when her name flashed across my phone screen, I already felt the warning hum somewhere between my ribs. I was sanding down the leg of a century-old coffee table in my workshop, sawdust clinging to my shirt, my hair tied in a messy knot on top of my head. The morning sun was filtering through the window, landing on half-finished furniture like soft gold. I wiped my palms on my jeans before answering. "Hi, Mom." She didn't bother greeting me. "Raina, your brother and Sutton have decided on a guest adjustment for the wedding." Guest adjustment. That was her new favorite phrase. She used it last month when she uninvited my cousin for wearing too much eyeliner to an engagement dinner. "What kind of adjustment?" I asked, even though the pit in my stomach already knew. Her sigh was soft, controlled, practiced. "We need you to sit this one out." I froze. The sanding block slipped from my hand and hit the concrete floor with a light tap. "Sit out," I repeated. "It's better for everyone." Her tone sharpened just slightly. "You know how important the optics are. Jasper's wedding is being covered by 3 lifestyle blogs. And I'm, what, bad optics?" My voice felt thin. "It's not about you," she said quickly, "the way people talk when it is absolutely about you. It's the aesthetic, the colors, the balance of the bridal party. You'd stand out too much." I blinked. "Stand out how?" She lowered her voice like the truth needed privacy. "Your style is rustic, earthy. We can't risk you mismatching the photos." My throat tightened, I swallowed hard. "I can follow the dress code, you know I can." "Yes, but it's not just clothes," she said. "It's your presence, sweetheart. Your energy is, well, let's just say you don't blend." I stared at the antique table in front of me. Its legs were uneven, cracked, scarred, but with enough patience, enough sanding, enough care, something broken could become beautiful again. I wasn't sure the same rule applied to people. "So Jasper agreed to this?" I whispered. "Of course he did," she said. "He doesn't want unnecessary distractions." Distractions. My heart dipped so low I felt it in my spine. "We'll send you photos," she added like it was compensation. "Right," I said quietly. "Okay." I hung up before she could hear the crack in my voice. Silence swallowed my workshop. The scent of old wood, glue, and citrus oil filled the air. The table looked at me like it knew something I didn't. I picked up the sanding block again, but my hands shook too hard to hold it steady. I set it down, walked to the back door, stepped outside into the cold morning. The world looked the same, frost on the fence, sun warming the garden soil, birds hopping along branches, yet something inside me felt tilted, like the ground had shifted a few degrees without warning. When I returned to the workshop an hour later, still lost in a fog of disbelief, I noticed something on the floor, half hidden under the doorframe. A folded piece of paper. No envelope, no handwriting I recognized, just 5 words. "Don't go, they're hiding something." My pulse hammered. I stepped back, scanning the yard, the alley on the side of the workshop, the street beyond my fence. No one was there. I picked up the note with careful fingers. No signature, no explanation, nothing but warning. For a long moment, I stood in the empty workshop holding that slip of paper like it was evidence in a crime I didn't yet understand. Something deep inside me whispered, "This isn't about photos. This isn't about aesthetics. This is about something else." And suddenly, the uninvitation felt less like rejection and more like protection from something I wasn't supposed to see. The next morning started too early and too violently. I had barely sipped my first coffee when someone began pounding on the front door of my apartment. Not knocking, pounding. Urgent. Aggressive. The sound rattled the picture frames on my wall. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around myself and opened the door. My family stood there like a storm had blown them onto my porch. Mom at the center, lips pursed in a tight line. Dad behind her, arms folded, jaw clenched like he was holding back a lecture. Jasper, my brother, eyes red as if he hadn't slept. And Sutton, his perfect influencer fiancé, looking pale and anxious. But the stranger standing in the back caught my eye instantly. Tall, dark hair, hands in the pockets of a black coat, eyes alert, observant, quiet, the best man, at least judging by the suit bag draped over his arm. He wasn't scowling like the others, he didn't look angry, he looked curious. My mother pushed forward, ignoring my shock. "What did you tell people?" she demanded. I blinked. "I didn't tell anyone anything." "Then explain this." She shoved her phone in my face. A message from Aunt Helena. Why would you uninvite Raina? She deserves to be there. I stepped back a little. I didn't tell her, Jasper snapped. Someone did, and it wasn't us. My father added stiffly, you always twist situations to make us look bad. I felt my breath shorten. I didn't twist anything. Sutton wrung her hands, panic rising. My mother is furious. She thinks your absence means there's family conflict. The sponsors are asking questions. Sponsors, always image. I looked at her, really looked. There was fear behind her eyes, not of me, but of her entire life unraveling. I didn't send anything to anyone, I said. Mom called me. She said I wasn't invited. That's the whole story. The stranger shifted his weight. His eyes flicked toward me again, like he was trying to read between the lines of my words. Mom crossed her arms. This is exactly why we didn't want you there. You create chaos without even trying. I felt those words lodge somewhere painful. Before I could respond, the stranger finally spoke. His voice was low, steady, calm. Is she the woodworker? Everyone turned toward him. Mom scowled. What does that have to do with anything? Evan, the best man. He took a step forward. His gaze was steady on me. You're Raina York, right? Yes, I said carefully. I know your work. A hush fell, I swallowed. My work, he nodded slowly, almost in awe. 2 years ago, I bought a refurbished Victorian desk from a private seller. The craftsmanship was unlike anything I'd ever seen. The way you rebalanced the drawers, reinforced the legs, restored the original carvings without losing the structure. He shook his head. The piece was signed RY on the bottom. That was you, my breath caught. You bought that? He smiled faintly. I've been following your restorations ever since. Your technique is unique. Brilliant. My mother scoffed loudly. She sands old things in her garage. That is hardly, no, he interrupted gently. She preserves art. She brings dead pieces back to life. Something warm and unfamiliar crawled through my chest. Recognition, not for my appearance, not for my utility, for my work. Jasper stepped forward angrily. Who cares? This isn't about furniture. Dad added, we don't have time for this nonsense. Raina, you need to stay quiet. You've already damaged the wedding's reputation. What damage? I asked. All I did was tell the truth. Mom glared at me. Which truth? That we didn't invite you. You should be grateful we're still including you in the rehearsal dinner. You uninvited me from that too, I said softly. Silence. Sutton blinked rapidly, panic rising. That wasn't personal, she whispered. We need things to look cohesive. We're building a brand. A brand, a brand, a brand. Every word stabbed deeper. Evan's eyebrows rose slightly. You uninvited her because she doesn't match your brand? Dad snapped. Stay out of this. But Evan didn't. He looked at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle, then asked a question no one expected. What are they hiding? Mom's head whipped toward him. Excuse me. He nodded toward the crumpled paper sitting on my coffee table, the note someone slipped under my workshop door. I hadn't realized I'd left it visible. Evan asked gently, who wrote that? I looked at him helplessly. I don't know. Dad stepped in front of me. We are not doing this. Raina, stop letting strangers involve themselves in private family matters. Something cracked inside me. There's nothing private about any of this, I said. You uninvited me to protect your image, then blamed me for telling the truth. Now you're accusing me of things I didn't do. Mom's face twisted. You are making a scene. I felt heat rise in my chest. Years of small cuts disguised as comments. Years of being the invisible daughter. The muted background. The unglamorous, unpolished, inconvenient piece of the York family puzzle. I'm not making a scene, I said quietly. I'm finally speaking, Jasper groaned. We don't have time for this drama. Sutton's bridal brunch starts in 2 hours. Mom straightened her blazer. Raina, you're going to stay quiet until the wedding is over. No more messages. No more conversations. No more truth-telling. Do you understand? No, I didn't. For the first time, I didn't understand why their comfort mattered more than my dignity. I lifted my chin. No, her eyes narrowed. No, no, I repeated. Dad's nostrils flared. You don't get to refuse us. This time, Evan stepped forward just enough to stand beside me. He didn't touch me, but he didn't need to. His presence shifted the conversation. She does get to refuse, he said calmly. She's an adult, not your prop. Everyone froze. I exhaled slowly. Please leave. My mother opened her mouth. Dad raised a hand, Jasper scowled. Sutton whimpered, but I said it again. Lower this time, stronger. Leave. They finally did, but the storm they carried with them stayed. After they left, the quiet in my apartment wasn't comforting. It felt like standing in a room where something had just been broken, a vase, a window, a bone, and the pieces hadn't finished falling yet. I went back to the workshop to distract myself, but my hands weren't steady. The wood kept splintering under the pressure of my grip. Every few hours, I glanced at the folded note on the corner of my table. The warning lingered in my mind like smoke. Someone was trying to protect me. Someone knew something I didn't. By sunset, my nerves were stretched thin, so when someone knocked gently on my workshop door, I startled badly enough that my chisel clattered to the floor. When I opened it, Evan stood there. He looked different without the angry circus of my family around him. Taller, calmer, more thoughtful. I hope I'm not crossing a boundary, he said quietly. I just wanted to check on you. My voice shook. Why? He nodded toward the workshop. Because no one should face that alone. A lump rose in my throat. No one usually notices. He stepped inside slowly, glancing around at the half-finished chairs and tables. Your work is incredible, he murmured. There was no flattery in his tone, just wonder. I leaned against the workbench. Why were you defending me out there? You don't even know me. He hesitated. I know what it looks like when a family decides someone is convenient only when they can be used. My chest tightened. Is that what you think they're doing to me? He met my eyes. That's what I saw. I swallowed. You barely met them. He gave a sad smile. I've known people like them my whole life. I stared at the floor. What did you mean earlier, asking what they're hiding? He exhaled. When I mentioned your furniture piece, the one you restored, I remembered something. His brow creased. A few months ago, Jasper bragged at work about restoring a vintage set of dining chairs for a design competition. He showed pictures, I froze, and I recognized them. They were your style, exactly your style, down to the dovetail pattern and the finish technique. He looked at me carefully. I think he used your work to win. My stomach dropped. That can't be right. He shook his head. I'm not mistaken. I pressed a hand against my chest to steady the pain blooming there. Why would he do that? Evan looked away. Why would your family uninvite you to your own brother's wedding? I didn't answer. The silence grew thick again, heavy enough that even the air felt tense. After a long moment, he stepped back. I don't want to cause more trouble for you. I just thought you should know what I saw. Why? I whispered. His eyes softened, but his voice stayed steady. Because your family is building their world on a lie, and they expect you to stay quiet forever. He paused. You deserve someone who actually listens. I blinked hard. My throat burned, but I didn't cry, not yet. When he left, the workshop felt different. Bigger. And for the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar flicker inside me. Not hope, not exactly. More like awakening. Wednesday night was the wedding rehearsal dinner. The one I was supposedly not attending. The one I was forbidden from showing up to because my mere existence looked off-brand. I expected the evening to be quiet, maybe lonely, but peaceful. Instead, it turned into something else entirely. At 6:03 p.m., when I was in my workshop brushing finishing oil onto a refurbished dining table, the side gate slammed open so hard the latch cracked off the wood. I turned, heart racing. My mother stormed into my backyard like she'd been chasing a ghost. Her makeup was perfect, but her eyes were wild. Behind her came my father, red-faced, breathing hard. Jasper, sweat on his brow, fists clenched. Sutton, shaking visibly. And behind them, Evan, but he wasn't angry. He wasn't frantic. He was watching them like he was watching a bomb roll toward its own fuse. My mother pointed at me with trembling fingers. What did you do? I blinked. What are you talking about? Dad thundered. You ruined the rehearsal dinner. My heart stuttered. I wasn't even there. You didn't have to be, Jasper shouted. Your name was enough. What? I whispered. Sutton burst into tears. Someone confronted us at the venue. They recognized the dining chairs as yours. They said Jasper didn't restore them, that he stole credit. My mouth fell open. What? It's your fault, Jasper roared. You should have stayed quiet if you just kept your mouth shut. I didn't tell anyone, I cried. My mother hissed, liar. Evan stepped forward then, calmly, quietly, but the tension in his shoulders made the air around him hum. She's not lying, he said. Everyone turned to him. Dad glared. Stay out of this. I can't, Evan replied. Because your son didn't just steal chairs. He looked directly at me. He submitted her restored pieces for a design grant last year, under his name. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might collapse. I whispered. I know, he said gently. Jasper exploded. You have no proof. Evan reached into his coat, pulled out a folder, opened it slowly. Emails, screenshots, photos of my signature hidden under layers of varnished jasper added to hide my initials. Sutton gasped, hand covering her mouth. Mom stepped back like she'd been slapped. Dad's face went pale. What is this? Mom whispered. The truth, Evan said. My brother lunged at him. You ruined everything? No, Evan replied calmly. You ruined it the moment you built your future with someone else's hands. Silence. I scolded. Devastating. The world tilted around me. My knees felt weak, my fingers numb. I whispered, why would you do that to me? Jasper's face twisted. Because you don't deserve anything. You hide in this stupid workshop. You don't want the spotlight. You don't fight for yourself. What difference did it make if I used your work? At least someone was putting it to use. I felt something break inside me, not a small fracture, a clean snap. My mother tried to gather herself. Raina, sweetheart, let's talk inside. No, I said softly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I stood straighter than I ever had. No more talking inside. No more backroom deals. No more using me as your silent little workhorse. Dad growled, don't you speak to your mother like that. Evan stepped slightly closer, positioning himself beside me, not touching, just steady. I looked at my family, really looked at them, at their panic, their fear, their desperation, and realized something important. They weren't angry because I lied. They were angry because the truth finally had a witness. I exhaled slowly, deliberately. I'm done, I whispered. Done being your quiet helper, done being erased, done pretending I don't see what you've taken, Jasper scoffed. You can't survive without us. My chest tightened, then loosened. I already am, I murmured. Mom's eyes filled with tears, not of regret but humiliation. How could you do this to us, to your brother? Evan's voice cut through the cold air. She didn't do anything to you. You did it to yourselves. The wind rustled the leaves overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. My workshop lights flickered gently inside. I looked at my family one last time. Leave, I said. Nobody moved, so I said it again. Leave. This time, they heard me. They left in a flurry of anger, betrayal, and shattered illusions. Evan lingered a moment longer, his breath visible in the cold night air. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. He simply nodded once, a soft, steady acknowledgement, then turned and followed them into the darkness. I stood alone in my backyard, the cold biting through my clothes, the note still sitting inside my workshop like a prophecy fulfilled. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the truth anymore. The night after the rehearsal disaster, I barely slept. My brain kept replaying the scene in the yard on a loop. My mother's shock, my father's fury, Jasper's confession, Evan's folder of proof. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the papers flapping in my father's hands, my initials carved under varnish I didn't put there. RY, hidden, buried, stolen. By morning, my pillowcase was damp and my throat felt raw. Not from crying, I never fully broke, but from swallowing back everything I wanted to scream. The wedding was in 2 days. I told myself I wasn't going. I told myself I wanted nothing to do with it. I told myself I was done. But lies come in many forms. Some of them are the ones you tell yourself to avoid feeling how much something still hurts. I spent the next day in the workshop, sanding a chair so aggressively my fingers cramped. The rhythmic scrape of sandpaper against wood should have calmed me. It usually did. Today it just sounded like an accusation. By late afternoon, someone knocked on the workshop door again. Not pounding this time. A careful, hesitant knock. My body tensed anyway. 1 second, I called. When I opened it, Sutton stood there alone. Her eyes were swollen, like she'd been crying for days. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a low bun that didn't match the glamorous, effortless image she always posted online. She looked stripped of her filters, literally and metaphorically. Sutton, I said cautiously, I know I'm the last person you want to see, she blurted, but I needed to come. I stepped aside slowly. You can come in. She walked into the workshop like it was a foreign country. Her eyes swept over the furniture, the tools, the half-finished pieces. She touched nothing, but I saw her fingers twitch like she wanted to. I didn't know, she said finally, turning to me. About any of it. Her voice trembled. About what? I asked, although I already knew. About the chairs, the grant, the way your family treats you. She swallowed hard. Jasper always told me you were reclusive, uninterested, that you didn't care about credit, you just liked tinkering with old junk. He said he was the one with the eye for design. A bitter laugh escaped my throat before I could stop it. Of course he did. She flinched, not at me, but at the realization of what that meant. I saw the folder, she whispered. The receipts, your signature. Evan showed me after he left your yard. He said I needed to know who I was marrying. My heart squeezed. And what did you decide? Tears spilled over her lashes. That I don't know him at all. She looked utterly lost, a doll whose strings had been cut. The image of perfect fiancé had dissolved, leaving behind a woman who looked too human for the curated boxes her life was shoved into. I have a question, I said quietly. Did you write the note? Her eyes shot up. What note? I gestured to the folded paper on my workbench. She came closer, reading, Don't go, they're hiding something. She shook her head, a frown pulling between her brows. No, I didn't. I had no idea you were uninvited until 2 days ago. Jasper just said the guest list was tight and you preferred to be alone. That stung more than I expected. If you didn't write it, I said slowly, then who did? She hesitated. There is one person who might have known, someone from the venue. The event coordinator, Clara. I overheard her arguing with your mother last week. She said she recognized your pieces from an online feature and asked why your name wasn't on any of the documents. My pulse quickened. What did my mother say? Sutton's shoulders slumped. That you were just the help. That the artistry was Jasper's. My jaw clenched. And then, I asked. And then, Sutton whispered, Clara told her she didn't like lies, that word for word. People like you always find ways to erase the ones who do the real work. She gestured toward the note. If anyone tried to warn you, it was probably her. I reached for the paper again, and now it felt different in my hands. Less mysterious, more kind. Sutton took a shuddering breath. I called off the sponsorship contracts this morning. I blinked. What? The brands, the magazines, the influencer collabs built around our perfect story. I canceled them. She laughed bitterly. My mother nearly fainted. She said I was throwing away my future. What did you say? I asked. I said I'd rather have no sponsorship than build my life on fraud. Her voice shook. I don't know who I am without the image, but I know I don't want to be this version. Silence wrapped around us, thick but not suffocating. She looked at me with raw sincerity. You don't owe me anything. You don't have to forgive me for not asking questions sooner. But I want you to know I was blind. I'm trying not to be anymore. I nodded slowly, feeling something in my chest loosen just a fraction. Thank you for telling me. She wiped at her cheeks. The wedding's still happening, tomorrow. The guest list is smaller. No brands, no photographers, no sponsors. Just family and a few close friends. And Evan. My heart thudded once too hard. Why are you telling me this? Because I wanted you to hear it from me when I say, her voice broke. You have every right to be there. I stared at her. You're inviting me? Yes. Her gaze didn't waver. As Jasper's sister, as the artist whose work he stole, as the person your parents should have been proud of but weren't. I inhaled slowly. And what do you expect from me if I come? Forgiveness? A performance? She shook her head. Just your truth, whatever that looks like. I looked past her at the table I'd been restoring. The wood didn't lie. It cracked, it warped, it splintered, but it didn't pretend. For the first time, the idea of standing in front of my family, not as their quiet background piece but as myself, didn't terrify me. It felt necessary. I'll think about it, I said. Sutton nodded. That's all I can ask. As she left, the workshop felt strangely lighter. The note lay on the workbench, edges curled, words still sharp. For the first time, I believed them. They're hiding something. And tomorrow, they wouldn't be able to hide anything at all. The morning of the wedding was too bright for the chaos it held. The sky was a clear, piercing blue, and the wind had softened into a lazy breeze that carried the faint scent of cut grass and distant flowers. It felt like a day designed for happiness, which somehow made everything feel more wrong. I stood in front of my small bedroom mirror, smoothing down the skirt of a simple dark green dress. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't trendy. It didn't scream for attention, but it felt like me. I tied my hair back in a loose braid and stared at my reflection. Are you sure? I asked the woman in the mirror. Her eyes were tired but clear. Yes, I imagined her saying. I'm done hiding. The venue was a renovated greenhouse on the edge of town, a blend of glass, steel, and climbing ivy. It was the kind of place my mother loved. Curated, Instagram-ready, expensive without looking like it was trying too hard. As I walked up the stone path, I felt eyes on me. Guests stood in clusters, murmuring, adjusting suits and dresses. Some recognized me, some pretended not to. My mother spotted me first. She stiffened so visibly it was almost theatrical. "Raina," her voice clipped the air like scissors. "Mom," I said evenly. She looked me up and down, searching for something wrong and coming up empty. It almost disappointed her. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered through clenched teeth. "I was invited," I replied, "by the bride." For a moment, she looked like she might explode. Then she plastered on that smooth society smile. "Try not to draw attention to yourself," she said. "No dramatics, no outbursts. Today is about your brother." I almost laughed. I was so tired of days that were always about my brother. Before I could respond, a familiar voice cut in from behind her. "Good morning, Raina." I turned. Evan stood there, straightening his tie. He looked different in a suit, less rugged, more polished, but his eyes were the same. Sharp, observant, quietly kind. "Hey," I said, my shoulders relaxing half an inch. Mom forced a smile at him. "We were just talking about how grateful we are that the drama is behind us now." Evan's mouth twitched. "Of course you were." Her eyes narrowed, but he gently stepped around her to stand closer to me. "I'm glad you came," he said quietly. "You didn't have to." "I know," I replied. "That's why I'm here." The ceremony itself was strangely subdued. No brand banners. No photographers directing angles. No influencer friends live streaming from their phones. Just vows, flowers, and the brittle tension of a family trying desperately to pretend everything was normal. When the officiant said, "If anyone knows a reason why these two should not be wed," my heart jumped into my throat. I could have spoken. I could have stood up. I could have revealed every ugly truth, but I didn't. Because the truth wasn't mine alone to wield anymore. It was Jasper's burden now, Sutton's reality, my parents' mirror. I chose something else. I chose myself. The reception was held inside the greenhouse, tables scattered among hanging plants and strings of lights. It was beautiful, it was intimate, and it felt like a carefully staged bomb waiting for a spark. I thought that spark might be me. Turns out it wasn't. It was Clara. I didn't recognize her at first. She was moving through the space with a clipboard and headset, directing servers, adjusting place cards. Then she reached my table and her eyes landed on me. "You're Raina, right?" she asked. "Yes," I said slowly. A flicker of understanding crossed her face. "Good, I wanted to see you here." She glanced around, then slipped a folded piece of paper onto the table in front of me. Same hand, same type of fold, same energy. "I'm the one who slipped the note under your door," she said quietly. My chest tightened. "Why?" "Because I've watched families like yours for years," she said. "They use people like you in the dark and shine lights on the wrong ones. I recognized your work in every piece they claimed as Jasper's vision. It made my skin crawl." Her gaze hardened. "I couldn't stop them, but I could warn you." Emotion burned behind my eyes. "Thank you," she nodded once. "Watch the speeches," she said. "Today's the last day they'll get away with the story they're telling." Then she moved on, leaving me with my heart pounding. By the time the speeches started, the sun had dipped low, casting warm amber light through the glass structure. It made everything look softer than it was, safer than it felt. My father gave the first toast. He talked about hard work, values, family legacy. He didn't mention me. My mother followed. She cried on cue. Threw in a joke about Jasper being her favorite son since birth. Even though he was her only son, people laughed anyway. Then it was Evan's turn. Best man, keeper of receipts, reluctant truth-teller. He took the microphone, fingers curling around it with quiet certainty. His gaze swept the room once, then landed on me for the briefest moment. "Hi," he began. "I'm Evan, and when Jasper asked me to be his best man, I said yes because I believed I knew who he was." A few polite chuckles. Jasper grinned nervously. "But this isn't that kind of speech," Evan continued. The air shifted. "I don't need to tell you how charming he is. You all know that. I don't need to tell you how ambitious he is. You've seen the articles." He paused. "What I need to tell you is something else." My parents visibly stiffened at their table. I watched my mother's fingers tighten around her champagne flute. I met Jasper at work, Evan said. I admired his design sense, his confidence. He talked often about his journey, the grants he won, the furniture he restored, the pieces he claimed as his own. He glanced toward the side of the room. Clara, could you dim the lights for a moment? The coordinator complied. The room darkened, leaving the stage and projected images clear and bright. On the greenhouse wall behind him, a photograph appeared, a Victorian desk, polished, restored, signature hidden beneath the frame. The air left my lungs. This is the piece that made me notice Jasper, Evan said. He presented it as his work, said he restored it by hand, said it was his breakthrough. He clicked a button. Another image appeared. The underside of the desk zoomed in, RY, my initials. A ripple of whispers spread through the room. He wasn't lying about one thing, Evan said softly. It is brilliant work. Just not his. The next image appeared, screenshots of emails, invoices, timestamps. Jasper didn't act alone, Evan continued. His family supported the lie. They erased the name of the artist behind the restoration. They built his image on her work. My mother shot up from her seat. That's enough. Evan didn't raise his voice, but the microphone made every syllable ring. I agreed to stand by his side today because I thought this wedding was about partnership. Honesty, building a future together. His gaze shifted toward Sutton. But you can't build a future on foundations this broken. Silence sat heavy, the kind that rearranges people. He looked at me then, not apologetically, not pleadingly, like he was acknowledging something that had been invisible for too long. So, before this night goes any further, he said, I think the person who deserves to decide how this story continues is the one who has been edited out of it. And then, impossibly, he held the microphone out to me. My heart stopped. Every eye in the room turned. Every breath waited. I stood up slowly. My legs trembled just enough that I had to steady myself on the back of my chair, but I walked forward anyway. My mother's hissed, "Don't you dare," barely reached my ears. I took the microphone from Evan. He stepped back, giving me space. No pressure, no direction. The choice was mine. I looked out at the crowd, at my parents' furious faces, at Jasper's pale shock, at Sutton's tear-streaked cheeks, at Clara's steady gaze, at the empty chairs where sponsors might have sat, and then I spoke. My name is Raina, I said quietly, and for most of my life, I've been the background of this family. No one moved. I restore old things, I continued. Furniture people throw away because it's scratched, cracked, uneven. I see the value under the damage. I fix what's broken. I never needed public credit. I didn't care about being celebrated. I just wanted to work. I let my gaze rest on my brother, but wanting to work in peace doesn't mean wanting to be erased. His eyes dropped. I've paid bills in this family, fixed problems, stayed up late repairing things that weren't my fault. I did it quietly because that's what was expected, because I was taught that my job was to carry the weight and smile while doing it. I inhaled slowly. When my brother submitted my pieces under his name, when my parents helped him hide my signature, when they uninvited me from this wedding because I didn't match the brand, I swallowed. They didn't just hurt me. They told me very clearly what I meant to them. I looked at my mother. Her face was tight, terrified, angry. I'm not here to ruin anything, I said. I'm not here to humiliate anyone. I'm here because for the first time, someone handed me a microphone instead of a broom. A faint, shocked laugh bubbled at a table in the back. I don't want revenge, I said. I want something else. I want distance. I want peace. I want to build something that isn't dependent on me being silent. I turned back to Jasper. He couldn't meet my eyes. You built a life on my work, I said softly. You could have just asked me to stand next to you. We could have built something together. Instead, you tried to stand on top of me. He flinched. So this is what I'm going to do, I said. I'm not going to demand compensation. I'm not going to sue. I'm not going to drag this out. I'm just stepping out. Confusion flickered across faces. I am removing myself from the York family story, I clarified. You won't have to worry about me ruining your photos, or your brand, or your narrative. Consider this my final restoration project. I handed the microphone back to Evan, then I walked off the stage, not dramatically, not storming, just done. Behind me, the quiet shattered. People don't realize how loud a room can be in silence. I made it halfway to the greenhouse exit before I heard Sutton call my name. Raina, wait! I turned. She was already jogging toward me, lifting the hem of her dress to avoid tripping. Her veil was slightly crooked, her lipstick smudged. She looked less like a bride and more like a person whose life had just cracked open in public. She stopped in front of me, breathing hard. "You can't just leave," she whispered. I raised an eyebrow. "Why not? You all left me a long time ago," she winced. "You're right, we did, they did," but she looked over her shoulder. Inside the greenhouse, chaos was blooming. My father arguing with Evan in low, sharp tones. My mother whisper-screaming at Clara. My brother standing frozen near the table, clutching a half-empty glass like it was a lifeline. "They're going to try to spin this," Sutton said. "They're going to blame you, or Evan, or anyone but themselves." "Let them," I replied. "I'm not playing anymore." She shook her head, tears glistening. "I'm not asking you to fix them. I'm asking you if you're sure you're okay walking away with no closure." Closure. I thought about the envelope in my yard, about the receipt folder, about years of whispered dismissals and invisible labor. "I think," I said slowly, "closure isn't something they can give me." Her shoulders dropped. We stood there for a moment in the doorway between two worlds, the carefully curated greenhouse behind us, the quiet parking lot ahead. "Are you still going to marry him?" I asked finally. She flinched like I'd struck her. "I don't know," she admitted. "I thought today would make it clear, that I'd hear him fight for us, for me, for the truth." She swallowed. "But he hasn't said a word since Evan started speaking." I glanced back through the glass. Jasper was still standing there, staring at the table like he couldn't quite comprehend his reflection in it. "Sutton," I said gently, "you deserve someone who doesn't go silent when it matters." Tears spilled down her face. "I'm scared to start over." "I was too," I said, "but staying is a slow kind of dying." She nodded slowly, absorbing that. Behind her, I saw my mother heading our way, fury barely contained. "You should go," I murmured. Sutton surprised me then. She stepped forward and hugged me, not a delicate embrace, a real one, tight, messy, full of shaking breath. "I'm sorry," she whispered against my shoulder, "for not seeing you sooner." I stiffened, then forced my arms to relax enough to briefly return the hug. "Try to see yourself too," I said. "You're more than a brand." She pulled back, eyes shining. "I think I needed you to say that." Mom's heels clicked closer on the stone path. I stepped aside. "Raina, what have you done?" Mom hissed, stopping short of grabbing my arm. "You've humiliated our family in front of everyone." I looked at her, really looked. Her perfectly styled hair, her expensive dress, her trembling hands barely holding onto control. "I didn't do anything to you," I said quietly. "I just stopped covering for you." Her eyes flashed. "We raised you, and I'm grateful," I admitted, "but you don't get to use that as an eternal receipt." She opened her mouth to retort. I lifted a hand. "I'm not arguing with you in the doorway of a greenhouse," I said. "I've spent enough of my life defending myself from people who refuse to listen." Her lips pressed together. "For what it's worth," I added, "I hope you figure out how to tell the truth, to yourself if no one else." She scoffed. "You've become so dramatic." I almost laughed. "No, I've just stopped apologizing for existing." I walked away. Outside, the air was cooler. Quiet. Real. The sky had deepened into shades of orange and pink. The parking lot was mostly empty. I hadn't realized how early it still was. The night hadn't even begun for most people. For me, something had ended. Something else was beginning. I was halfway across the lot when I heard footsteps jogging to catch up. "Raina, wait." This time, it was Evan. I turned. "Thought you'd be busy mediating an explosion." He huffed a humorless laugh. "They'll manage without me, or they won't. Either way, I needed to make sure you got out of there in one piece." "I'm fine," I said. He studied my face. "You're shaking." I looked down at my hands. He was right. They were trembling just enough to betray the storm still raging inside me. "I don't feel fine yet," I admitted. "But I know I will be." He nodded once. "That's enough for today." We stood there in silence for a moment. The greenhouse glowed behind us like a snow globe about to crack. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for all the years no one saw you." Emotion pressed against my throat. "You saw me," I said. "That counts for something." He shrugged one shoulder. "It was the obvious thing." "No," I said softly. "It wasn't." He hesitated. "So what now?" I looked toward the road. "Now I go home," I said. Tomorrow, I go back to my workshop. And next week, I look into registering my work under my own name, officially. His eyes warmed. I can help with that. I have a lawyer who specializes in intellectual property. She owes me a favor. A small smile pulled at my lips. Are you trying to recruit me into a legitimate version of my own life? Something like that, he replied. I shook my head, amused despite the ache in my chest. I'll think about it. He took a slow breath. If you ever need anything, I know, I cut in gently. You've already done a lot, more than anyone else. He dipped his head in acknowledgement. Then I'll just say this, he said. Don't let this be the biggest thing that ever happens to you. I frowned slightly. What do you mean? Don't let this trauma, this night, this revelation be the peak. Let it be the turning point. He stepped back. You deserve 1,000 bigger, better moments than this. Something in my chest loosened. I'll try, I said. He smiled. It reached his eyes this time. That's all I wanted to hear. I got into my car. He watched to make sure I safely pulled out of the lot. Neither of us said goodbye. It didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning we weren't rushing into. It's strange how quiet your life becomes after you stop chasing noise that was never meant for you. The months after the wedding moved in uneven waves. The first week felt like a hangover, dull, heavy, everything too bright. Every time my phone buzzed, I braced for another explosion. It didn't come. What came instead were smaller, quieter things. A message from Clara with contact info for a gallery owner who specialized in functional art. A text from one of the guests who had watched everything unfold, apologizing for not stepping in sooner and asking if I took commissions. A letter? Yes, an actual letter from my Aunt Helena, saying she'd always suspected something was wrong in how my parents treated me, but never knew how to help. I didn't hear from my parents. I didn't hear from Jasper. At first, the silence felt like punishment. Then it started to feel like space. In January, I registered my business formally, Raina York Restoration and Design. A week after my paperwork went through, Evan showed up at the workshop with coffee and a thick envelope. All the legal forms, he said, holding it out. Trademark protections, copyright registrations, contracts templates that credit you for your work. I blinked. You really didn't have to go to all this trouble, he shrugged. I'm good at paperwork. You're good at making things that deserve protection. We're both playing to our strengths. I took the envelope, our fingers brushed. Neither of us mentioned it. We slipped into a new rhythm, not rushed, not heavy, just steady. Sometimes he'd stop by the workshop after work to help me move heavier pieces. He'd ask about the stories behind the furniture I restored, who it belonged to, where it came from, what history it carried in its grooves and dents. Sometimes we'd sit on the back steps, drinking tea in mismatched mugs, watching the sky change colors. He never asked about my family unless I brought them up. I rarely did. In late February, Sutton came by again. She wasn't wearing a ring. I moved out, she said simply. I'm staying at a friend's place across town while I figure out what comes next. We drank tea at my tiny kitchen table. She told me she'd canceled the wedding registry, returned the gifted items, unfollowed half the brands she used to worship. I feel like my life is empty, she admitted. But in a weird way, I also feel like it's finally mine. I understood that more than I could say. We didn't become best friends overnight, but something tentative and real grew between us. An understanding that we were both trying to build lives that weren't made of smoke and mirrors. In early spring, I got an email from a local arts collective. Subject line, proposal, furniture restoration exhibit featuring your work. Clara had sent them photos, without asking my permission first. I wasn't even angry. They wanted to host a small showcase. Not a gala, not a flashy event. Just an evening where people could walk through a space filled with pieces I'd rescued from landfills, attic corners, and yard sales. I almost said no. Stepping into a room where people would look at things I created felt more vulnerable than anything I'd done so far. Then I remembered standing in that greenhouse with a microphone, my heart racing, my voice steady. If I could do that, I could do this. The night of the exhibition, I arrived early. The space was warm, filled with soft lighting and the subtle scent of varnish and old wood. My pieces sat on small platforms and against walls, each with a little card bearing my name. My full name. People came, not hundreds, dozens. Enough to fill the space with a low hum of voices. They didn't know my family history. They didn't ask me who I was related to, they only asked about the furniture. What made you choose this finish? How did you fix that split? Where was this piece before you got it? Questions I was happy to answer. Questions about my work, not my worth. At some point in the evening, I felt a familiar presence beside me. Looks good, Evan said. I turned. Which one? He gestured around. All of it, the room, the energy, you. A smile tugged at my lips. You clean up nice for someone who spends most of his time buried in contracts. He glanced down at his shirt. Thought I'd dress up for the artist's big night? My cheeks warmed at the word artist. I don't know if I'm big night material yet, I said. You stood up in front of your entire family and rewrote your name in real time, he replied. Everything after that counts as a big night. I looked around the room. People were taking photos, not of me, of my work. And for the first time, that didn't make me feel erased. It made me feel seen in the exact way I'd always wanted. Have you heard from them? He asked softly. I knew who he meant. Jasper sent an email, I said, a month ago. What did he say? That he's sorry, that he panicked, that he thought using my work would help both of us someday. I exhaled. He said he didn't know how to stop once it started. Evan watched my face carefully. And you? I told him I believe he's sorry, I said calmly, but forgiveness doesn't mean reunion. And your parents? I shook my head. Silence, which is what I expected, which is strangely okay. He nodded slowly. Families like that rarely admit fault. They're allergic to humility. I huffed a small laugh. You speak from experience? Very much so, he said dryly. We fell quiet for a moment, watching a woman run her fingers along the edge of a restored dresser, her eyes shining with appreciation. I used to think, I said softly, that if my family ever blew up like that, I'd be left with nothing. No one, just empty space. And now, he asked. Now I know space isn't nothing, I said. It's room. Room to invite in people who actually see me. Room to build something that's mine. Room to rest. He looked at me like he wanted to memorize that sentence. You know, he said, I used to think my future was tied to the people who raised me. Their expectations, their approval. And now, I echoed, now I know better, he said, because I met someone who walked away and didn't crumble. My chest tightened. Who? I asked, even though I already knew. He gave me a small, crooked smile. You. I held his gaze for a long moment. The room faded slightly. Not gone, just blurred. I didn't walk away alone, I said. Someone slipped a warning under my door. Someone spoke up in a greenhouse. Someone handed me a microphone when it wasn't theirs to give. He shrugged, but his eyes softened. Maybe, but you're the one who chose to use it. We stood there side by side, not touching, perfectly aligned. At the end of the night, when the last guest left and the lights dimmed, I walked through the exhibition one more time. I ran my hand over the smooth surfaces, the repaired cracks, the polished edges. Every piece here had been discarded once, deemed too damaged, too old, too broken, and yet here they stood, whole, worthy, seen. On my way out, I locked the door and stepped into the cool night air. The sky was clear, stars quietly watching. I heard footsteps behind me. You know, Evan said as we walked toward the street, we could grab dinner, to celebrate or not celebrate, just eat. I smiled. That sounds nice. He brushed his hand lightly against mine, an offering, not a demand. I let our fingers tangle. Not because I needed him to be whole, but because it felt good to walk toward the future beside someone who knew where I'd been. As we disappeared into the quiet streets, I realized something. My life was no longer defined by the table I wasn't allowed to sit at. I wasn't begging for a chair anymore. I was building my own, from scratch, out of all the parts of me they tried to discard. And somehow, without trying, the right people kept finding their way to it. If you've ever felt like the invisible one, the background character, the one people use and then ignore, I want you to hear this. You are not furniture in someone else's house. You are the builder. You don't have to wait for an invitation to a table that was never set for you. You can create your own space, your own work, your own family, your own ending. And sometimes, if you're patient enough, that ending doesn't feel like an ending at all. It feels like the first day of the life you were always meant to live.